Hi creeps, and welcome back to Dread and Buried. I'm your host, Bree, and before we get started today, I want to provide some trigger warnings. Today's story talks about murder and the abuse of older adults, so please take care while listening. Today we're going to be talking about a woman by the name of Amy Gilligan Archer Gilligan. Amy Archer Gilligan was born October 31st, 1873 in Milton, Connecticut. She was the 8th of 10 children, and she married a man by the name of James Archer in 1897. Amy and James had a daughter who they named Mary J. Archer in December of 1897. Now, unfortunately, not much else is known about Amy Archer Gilligan before the year of 1901. In 1901, the Archers were hired to take care of a man by the name of John Seymour, and he was an older adult and a widower. Amy and her husband James, along with their young daughter Mary, moved into John Seymour's home in Newington, Connecticut. When John Seymour died in 1904, the Archers rented his house from his heirs, and they converted his home into a boarding house for older adults. Now, some sources say that the Seymour's heirs turned the house into a home for older adults on their own, but who knows? The Archers remained in the Seymour home to provide care for the residents that lived there for a fee, even though Amy had no real qualifications for taking care of older adults. They paid rent to the Seymour's family, and they ran the boarding house as Sister Amy's nursing home for the elderly. And Amy was known as Sister Amy to the older adults that she took care of. In 1907, Seymour's family decided to sell the house. And so Amy, her husband, and their young daughter moved to Windsor, Connecticut. And they used their savings to purchase their own residence on Prospect Street in Windsor Center. They soon converted their home into a business, and that business was called Archer Home for the Elderly and Infirm. Now, while assisted living facilities are common now, they were a lot less common in the 10th century, and it was typically the family's responsibility to take care of the older adult family members. But by the 20th century, having multi-generational extended families living under one roof, or at least close to one another, was getting rarer as younger generations moved to places of greater economic opportunity. And so, the Archers were essentially pioneers in the field of elder care. The Archers had no problem filling their home with older adults. They advertised their services in local newspapers, and they had postcards made with a color picture of the house on one side. And this picture included the name of the home and its location. You see, the Archers' business plan was as follows. Older adults could pay a weekly fee that ranged from $7 to $25. Or they could pay $1,000 up front in exchange for a room in the home for life. The second option was the most popular. You see, the concept of assisted living facilities was extremely new. And this meant there were no specific agencies or organizations that monitored the quality of care, the services provided, or more. In 1909, the McClintock family of West Hartford, Connecticut, sued the Archer family. You see, the McClintock family claimed that there was a lack of care that was given to a family member who stayed in the home. Now, this case was settled outside of court, and the Archers ended up paying the family $5,000. This is equal to about $133,000 in 2020. Then, in 1910, just 1 year after the McClintock family of West Hartford sued the Archers, James Archer, Amy's husband, died seemingly of natural causes. At this time, James and Amy's daughter was 12 years old. Now, when James died, he also left behind back taxes that needed to be paid. The official cause of death for James Archer was Bright's disease, and this is just a generic term for kidney disease. Interestingly, Amy Archer had taken out an insurance policy on her husband, James, just a few weeks before his untimely death. And what she got from the policy allowed her to continue operating Archer Home. After James's death, older adults living in the Archer home began dying at an unpredictable and excitable rate. But the coroner, who also happened to be a close friend of the deceased James and his wife Amy, well, he determined that these deaths were due to natural causes related to old age. In 1913, just 3 years after her husband James's death, Amy married a man by the name of Michael W. Gilligan. Fun fact for you, she apparently shaved a few years off of her age on the wedding license application. Amy's second husband, Michael, was a widower, and he had 4 adult sons. He was reportedly wealthy, and while he was interested in marrying Amy, he was also interested in investing in the Archer home. However, on February 20th of 1914, just the next year after Amy and Michael married, in fact only 3 months after they had married, Michael died. And the official cause? Acute bilious attack. In other words, severe indigestion, according to the coroner. And so, Amy was once again financially secure because during their short marriage, Amy and Michael had drawn up a will. And this will left Michael's entire estate to Amy. And this estate, well, it was in excess of $4,000. For comparison, when Amy was sued by the McClintock family and she paid them $5,000, that equated to $133,000 in 2020. Between 1907 and 1916, so over a 9-year period, there were 60 deaths in the Archer home for the elderly and infirm. 12 of those deaths happened in a 3-year span between 1907 and 1910. This means that there were 48 deaths between 1911 and 1916. Now keep in mind that in the last 5-year period, the number of deaths at the Jefferson Street home in Hartford was similar. However, the population at that home was 7 times that of the Archer home in Windsor. Interestingly, deaths at the Archer home seem to correspond with times in which Amy's finances were under stress. There was also a pattern emerging related to the causes of death. You see, many of the residents of the Archer home died due to stomach pathologies, or they just died suddenly. And so relatives of Amy's clients, well, they grew suspicious, and they began to total the number of deaths. You see, on June 11th, 1914, for example, Alice and Lauren Gowdy signed a life contract with Amy Archer for $1,000 each. On December 3rd of that same year, Alice Gowdy died at the Archer home. That's just 6 months after she signed her lifetime contract. Among other residents that died at the Archer home was Franklin R. Andrews. You see, he was apparently very healthy. He was very active. He completed chores, he did yard work, and he even ran errands for Amy. He was also very close with his family, and he wrote to them very often. And in his letters, he talked about his life in the home and all of the things he did. He also mentioned the frequent deaths in the home. So when Mr. Andrews died, his death seemed untimely. On the morning of May 29th, 1914, Franklin R. Andrews was doing some work outside of the Archer house. His seemingly good health deteriorated in a single day, and he was dead by that evening. Given that he was active and in good health, his death was quite untimely. The official cause of death? A gastric ulcer. After Mr. Andrews' siblings, including a woman by the name of Nellie Pierce, came into possession of some of his letters, they noted occasions where Mrs. Amy Archer Gilligan was pressing their brother for money. You see, Amy's patients showed a pattern of dying not long after giving her a large sum of money. And as the deaths continued, Nellie Pierce, Franklin Andrews' sister, well, she reported her suspicions to the local district attorney. Unfortunately, he mostly ignored her. As a result, she took her story to the Hartford Courant, a prominent newspaper in Connecticut that is still active to this day. And on May 9th, 1916, the first of several articles on the, quote, murder factory, end quote, was published. A few months later, the police finally started to seriously investigate the home. Also of note, in 1916, the same year the first of several articles on the murder factory was published, a woman by the name of Maud Lynch died in the home. She was only 33. The investigation into the Archer home took almost a year to complete. By the time the investigation was over, it was believed that Amy was responsible for more than 48 deaths. The bodies of Michael Gilligan, her second husband, Andrews, a resident of the home, and 3 other boarders were exhumed. And it was determined that all 5 had died of poisoning. You see, Amy Archer Gilligan had used either arsenic or strychnine to kill these individuals. Of note, strychnine is a white, odorless, bitter crystalline powder, and it can be taken by mouth. It can be inhaled or breathed in, or it can be mixed into a solution and given through an IV. In other words, it can be injected directly into an individual's vein. You see, strychnine is a very strong poison, and only a small amount is needed to produce severe, lethal effects in people. Local merchants and shopkeepers were able to testify that Amy had been purchasing large quantities of arsenic. However, she argued, well, it was to kill the rats and the bedbugs in the home. A look into Michael Gilligan's will, that's Amy's second husband, established that the will was forgery, a forgery written by Amy herself. Remember, this will left Amy Michael Gilligan's entire estate, and Michael Gilligan was very wealthy. It was also discovered that just before Michael Gilligan's death, Amy had purchased 10 ounces of arsenic, enough to kill over 100 people. Furthermore, Franklin Andrews, the tenant at the Archer home, while his stomach contained enough arsenic, quote, to kill half a dozen strong men. End quote. Author M. William Phelps wrote a book titled The Devil's Rooming House. This book details the life, times, and crime of Amy Archer Gilligan. And according to this book, the investigation appeared to show that Amy was buying the arsenic to kill large numbers of rats. However, it appears that she did not buy all of the arsenic that killed the tenants of the Archer home. You see, the doctor that worked in the Archer house, Dr. King, as well as some of the patients, had signed off to purchase this arsenic. The police investigation pursued Dr. King because more and more evidence was piling up against him. However, suspicions were focused back on Amy when someone suggested to clearly check all records of arsenic purchases. And as a result of this checking, evidence was found of Amy sending her patients, the tenants of the Archer home, to the drugstore to buy quantities of arsenic. And as a result of this, the police were able to arrest and convict Amy. You see, Amy was arrested on May 8, 1916, and she was charged with murder. And the very next day, the Hartford Courant, that prominent newspaper that is still running today, they ran a story that called the Archer home the murder factory on the front page of their paper. And this story ran the very next day. Amy's trial began in June of 1917, and she was tried for 5 counts of murder. Her lawyer was able to have the charges reduced to just a single count: the murder of Franklin R. Andrews. On June 18, 1917, A jury found Amy guilty, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. Now, some sources say that due to a legal technicality, Amy's sentence was reversed. Other sources say that she appealed, and she was granted a new trial in 1919, 2 years after she was initially found guilty and sentenced to hanging. Amy's second trial began in June of 1919. At Amy's second trial, well, some sources say that she pleaded insanity. Other sources say she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. And yet, other sources say that she pleaded insanity, but she was found guilty of second-degree murder. Mary Archer, Amy Archer Gilligan's daughter, testified that Amy was addicted to morphine. Again, Amy Archer Gilligan was found guilty of murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison. In 1924, Amy was declared to be temporarily insane, and she was transferred to the Connecticut Hospital for the Insane in Middletown, Connecticut. She remained there until she died on April 23, 1962. So what do you think? Was she innocent? Was she guilty? Some people believe that the evidence against Amy was circumstantial, and that she was completely innocent. They believe that the arsenic that she had on hand really was used to kill the rats in the home. And as for the arsenic that was found in the bodies that were exhumed, well, it could have been due to the fact that from the Civil War until the early 1900s, arsenic was often used during the embalming process. Of note, in 1917, the year of Amy's first trial, Connecticut's state legislature introduced a bill that required, quote, old folks' homes, end quote, to be licensed and undergo inspections and annual reports of death. These reports had to be submitted to the State Board of Charities in an effort to prevent anything like this from happening again. If you're interested in seeing more about Amy's story in popular media, she was mentioned on the crime drama Criminal Minds in the season 5 episode titled The Uncanny Valley. I'm your host, Bree, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a video.